Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. I am so honored to have Rod Carter on the podcast today. I met Rod, oh my goodness, how many years ago is it now? Probably, oh my,
Like
20, 10, 15,
15.
15
We'll
years.
go with
Okay.
15.
I know, I'm like, what? You know, the math thing. About 15 years ago at Carthage College, which is where we both went to college. I served as the alumni director at that time, and Rod was on our alumni council. I got to know him, and just, oh my gosh, you have such a servant's heart. And then as I was just going through the past few weeks, your name just kept popping up. And so Rod is a dad, a son, a husband, and a lawyer, among many other things. And so honored to have you. Would you share just with our listeners a little bit more about you as we get started?
Yeah. So, Lauren, I grew up in Wisconsin and came to Carthage. My grandpa, interesting fact, my grandpa was on the state board that certified schools when Carthage was looking for a new campus. And my
Wow.
grandpa helped serve the college in locating its present location. So,
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
well, I never knew it. That was always where I was destined to go to college. My grandparents told me after the fact that they were glad I picked it because if I didn't pick it, I would have wound up there by force. But
Well,
enjoyed the time there. Studied history and political science. Went on to law school. Married my best friend in law school. Uh,
Mm,
and so we've got a lawyer-lawyer relationship. Work for Hush Blackwell now, which is what they call a big law firm. We've got over 1,000 attorneys in 20 different offices,
wow.
practice real estate and development law.
Wow.
Um, and I've got three kids as well who are now kind of on their own life journeys, which is interesting to watch them grow and develop. And I've got an 86-year-old mother who I
Mm,
keep on the right path as well at the same time. So
love that.
life is good. And I appreciate you talking to me this morning because I want to say, Lauren, you've really been, since we've known each other in the 15 years, I've looked up to you and you've kind of been a
Mm,
compass to me in both your personal and professional life. You don't just live life. You help people, and
mm,
I've loved watching you through social media and interacting with you differently throughout the years because you've been an inspiration to me
mm.
along this journey.
Thanks, Rod. That's so kind. Back at ya, seriously. Well, what is it? Yeah, what is it like being a lawyer couple? Is that an interesting dynamic? Do you have any funny stories? Do you guys practice similar law?
So my wife works for the Department of Transportation, which is a
Oh,
lot of real estate work because if you think about Department of Transportation issues, they're always dealing with dirt and grounds and
mm-hmm.
highway expansions or relocations. So we are kind of common
Mm-hmm.
in that regard. I do a lot of work in the tech real estate state space. So I do represent fiber providers, telecom companies, technology companies, data centers in deployment. So that's kind of neat
Yeah.
because it's the stuff that makes this podcast possible, for example.
Yeah. Wow.
A little bit of cutting edge. And then I do a lot of development work where clients are having trouble getting things done. So
Okay.
right now, working with an Indian tribe that's trying to get a drug rehabilitation center approved up in Rhinelander, working
Oh,
hard to get that done against some local opposition and some
wow.
negative perceptions that are going on. But
Wow.
I've enjoyed it, enjoying the journey. So
Yeah. Okay, so lawyers have this reputation of being a bit cutthroat, but you are not, or at least I have not experienced you in that way ever. I feel like you have the softest heart and you're like so kind. So how do you feel like that stereotype is true, number one? And then how have you kept your heart soft through all this?
gosh, I do think the stereotype is true. I think it's getting less true as we get new generations coming into the
Mm.
field, which is a
Mhm.
good thing. But when I started out, um, lawyers were your adversaries. So your opposing counsel was in no way supposed to be your best friend.
Mm.
And it was very cutthroat. I think I try to break through that. Yeah, I try to understand that a lot of the work that I do is negotiation. And I understand that there's always an emotional component
Mm.
to every deal.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll look at hard negotiators and I'll think, well, why are you being hard? And a lot of times, they've read books like The Art of the Deal, or um, they have this perception that you have to be a hard nose to get the deal done. And I think a lot of times their stance and their being hard noses really comes down to fear. And
Mm.
it's fear of maybe letting their client down,
Mm.
fear of disclosing they don't know everything, or may have a vulnerability. And I really try and break through that. But I also, in breaking through the fear, I try to get to know or get to know the adversary to say, what's it going to take to get the deal done?
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be difficult. It can just be straightforward,
Mhm.
and it can be me advancing your goals without us getting emotional for it. And I think you've got to. I always tell the young associates that I work with that the way to get through a deal and get to the end point and make your client happy is that you sort of want to be like a palm tree. You don't want to be like an oak tree, because what
Mm.
happens when the wind comes to the oak tree? It breaks, right?
Yeah.
But the palm tree sways, it goes with the flow. And if you can sway and go with the flow, you're gonna
Mm.
reap a much better benefit um, in the end. So I try and be a good negotiator. I try, and now unfortunately I've reached the point in my career where if I am dealing with a real jerk who I just can't deal with, I pass them off to someone else. But I think also
Well,
I've earned a reputation now for being reasonable, so people will
mm.
want.
Sure. Yeah, that's so good. It's like almost like it reminds me of like peacemaking where you're like literally drawing two sides together and like working that out. That's really it seems like yeah, much um more effective strategy and more peace-filled strategy as well. That's good. Well, I know that you have had a journey battling cancer, and when I talk to people who have gotten through um I don't know, there's just such wisdom from their lives and their experience. Could you share just like what that was like, what you gleaned, any life lessons?
Yeah, so cancer's crazy. And I was the last person, you're always the last person you think, we all think we're invincible, right? We're going to be that person who lives to be 100 years old and who they have on Good Morning America because we're running marathons at age 100. But
Yeah.
that's just not true. And so my cancer was made a little more unique that it happened and the symptoms occurred during the pandemic. So we were all afraid to go outside,
Wow.
afraid, in the days when you thought if you went to the grocery store, you ran a risk of catching COVID and
Yeah.
dying.
Yeah.
And I couldn't breathe. Um, and I thought I had a sinus infection. And my wife finally says to me, well, they're doing telehealth now, so you could see your doc on the tablet. You wouldn't have to go out. I thought, this is great because no one's going out. And the doc put me on prescriptions. I saw him on the telehealth appointment, put me on prescriptions, and that didn't clear it up. So finally, at the doctor's urging, I risked it. I went in for a CAT scan, and the doctor called me. I was sitting at my computer in the basement working, and he started out with those words. It was the words like, we see on TV. He
Mm.
started out by saying, "I'm really sorry," and I knew he
Oh
was
my
bad.
gosh.
And I had a tumor here, but then they also were concerned that there were some indicators that it had gone up into the brain. And the brain, when you think to the picture in your fifth grade science book, is has a whole bunch of cavities in it, and it's this coiled up mass. So they decided that they definitely needed to do chemo to cure this, and needed to do chemo to cure this.
Wow.
But all that came um, at really a delay. It was fast, but it's a delayed pace when you're thinking, what the heck is wrong with me?
Yeah.
And if you Google sinus cancer, it doesn't take you very long because we're all Google experts, right? And
Hmm.
Google's always right, and the internet's always right. Um, Most people don't survive sinus cancer, so I was convinced that I was going to die
Wow.
for several weeks. And then when they said, you do have a decent shot at pulling through this, I still wasn't fully convinced. So, Lauren, what during that process and what kind of was going on up here was rationalizing life.
Mm.
What is life? Life is not infinite, it's finite.
Mm.
And it, I sort of came to peace with that fact, and at peace with the fact that among those relationships that were important to me, there were good relationships. Sure, I wanted to do more with them, but I was happy with what I had done. I felt that I had set everyone up as good as I could set them up, and really, it sounds funny, but I really was at peace with the fact that this finite life could be coming to an end. And obviously I'm glad I'm here and talking to you in
Yeah.
full remission, which is one.
Yes. Yes.
But I look at when I think about death now and dying, I look at it much differently than how I did look at it. Number one, I recognize I'm not going to be here forever, and I look at other people along their journey and think the same thing. Um, but number two, I recognize that that's okay if you've set your life up properly.
Mm. Wow. Wow. Can you talk more about that? Like, how do you set your life up properly?
Yeah, so I've really given a lot of thought and not only to physical health since this, I work out now very regularly, more than I did before, but also, you know, mental health. And I've gotten into, I meditate now
Yeah.
uh, daily. And that's a huge part of the morning routine. So I
Mm.
try and get up early, and I try and have some time alone before the emails start hammering away.
Sure.
And part of that is kind of going through, clearing out, triaging emails, um, spending some time with my coffee, because that's one of my small guilty pleasures, which I guess isn't all that guilty, but I like.
Yeah. We love our coffee.
Yep. Spend time with the dogs, but then I use the Calm app, and I do the
Mm.
same app um, every day to kind of just get my mind around things. And in the app, I'm just sitting on the beach. Um, and even during the day when I do have that opposing counsel that is raising my blood pressure, I'll take time out. I will block out my office, and I'll take um, dim the lights and take about 100 deep breaths and just calm, and that does miracles. But
Wow.
also beyond that, I've really come to realize that my mantra is we all on this journey are interacting with one another, and I've come to the conclusion that your life is really a sum of the five people that you spend the most time with, and you need to pick winners. So who, and I found this when I was sick, who in my brain trust could I really reach out to and have support me? And then recognizing that's not a one-way street, I've got to be there for people too. So I try to keep mentally in my mind, who could I call in a pinch if I really need help? But also, am I making time for people who are important for me um, if they need to reach out? You know, we all say, "Hey, how are you today?" And a lot of times we just give this mechanical answer because we know people don't want to hear you're having a horrible day, or and you don't want to deal with it. Um, but we need to be there for those times that people open up to us and say, I am really struggling, or I was struggling yesterday, and I don't know how I'm going to get through today. Um, and we owe that to those people who are in our network. And the other thing that I'm finding, Lauren, is that it's really important to connect with people, and to connect regularly, and not with the same people. So I've got this Rolodex in my head, and you're in the Rolodex, and I've done this with you. Can I reach out to you today just to say, hey, Lauren, how's it going today? Or I saw you had this great trip. How was the trip? Um, but to connect with these different people who played an important role in your life, because life is really at its essence. It's not, again, it's not about the material things you have. It's about the relationships. And it's really important for your emotional well-being to have fun and to laugh and to have your friends. And that's even not only for friends, but for clients too, to an extent. It's, can I laugh with you? Can we have a good conversation? Can we relate to one another? Some clients aren't going to be your friends because of the nature of why they're coming to you and who they are. But if we can be friendly, and if we can identify with one another, we're going to be on that common level, and it's going to be so much more meaningful.
This is so rich. It's this is actually one of the reasons I started this podcast. I read a study that was in the New York Times. I think it was in 2020, and they said that we have like strong bonds and then weak bonds with people. And so strong bonds are like family and friends that are really close, and those are vital for well-being. But then also there's these weak bonds where you're talking to the cashier at the grocery store or the bank teller. And it's like those little interactions throughout the day that make us feel connected to a whole. And so I just love, like, I love that you were like, okay, who are my five? And then also, I love the Rolodex idea. That's like so intentional. Um, how, yeah, how do you go about the Rolodex thing? Are you like, do you like intentionally do it or just people come to mind? And then how did you pick your five?
So, well, it's interesting because relationships change over time, right? Think about the five that you would have had in college versus the five you have today, or maybe even a year ago. Um, I think in terms of picking the five, we all should have the five that immediately come to mind, and we write down. For you, I know it would be your mom. I know it would be your brother. I don't know who the other three would be, but they should be that obvious. And for you, at least with your mom and your brother, I know through knowing you that they're good people, and they are winners who you want on that list. But I also know, at least for me, that through time, maybe the five were people that shouldn't have been on the list because we're tempted at different times by different people that aren't always the best, but that we include them in that circle. So I'm being more conscious with those top five to really say, are these people winners? And that may sound a little egalitarian, but I don't think so, because this is about you and your success. And you, we deserve winners, right? And we deserve to have the five be winners. For the Rolodex, I do, it is intentional, and it is one of those early morning activities. It's who am I going to reach out to? And it might be one of my cousins, might be a parent of one of the kids' friends from grade school. It might be one of my Carthage connections, but just to say hi, how you doing? And I was thinking about you. I was thinking about you in that funny time we had 20 years ago where the squirrel attacked our tent when we were camping with the kids. And it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding. And then, those times when think about when you get the outreach from someone who's you're in their Rolodex, and how do you feel? And how does that make you feel if you really need to turn to someone? And there's different people you turn to for different types of problems and different types of issues. Um, and not to continue on without you giving me a question, but you brought up the New York Times article that you read, and I thought about there's an article out there that was in the Times, and it was based on a Harvard study from the 1950s, because Harvard Harvard's going to have all the important great studies, right? And so we got to put faith in this one because it's a Harvard study. But I think there's truth to this study. So what Harvard did is they took two groups of people in the 50s, and they followed these groups, and some of them are still around and still alive, and they've repopulated the groups as well. But one of the groups was a group of Harvard students, fairly driven people back in the 50s, that 50s mindset. Our adversaries are not our friends. And then the second group was a group of guys from South Boston who didn't go on to higher education. They were this random group that they picked, and that didn't have a lot materially when you compared them to the kids at Harvard. And you know what I'm going to say, that the study found that on the whole, it wasn't the ones with the most money that were the happiest. It was the ones with the quality relationships that are the happiest in that Rolodex.
It's so good. It's so good, so good, so good. Rod, thank you. Any other, just as we start to kind of close, two things. Any other words of wisdom? I just feel like you're such a deep well. And then I would love to hear a fun college story.
Oh gosh. Um, so the piece of advice would be to take chances. When you move outside your comfort zone, that's where the magic's going to happen. But also, from a relationship standpoint, what I find is we spend so much of our younger years worrying about how people are going to think of us and judge us, right? And some people still do, and they go to their grave worrying about that. But then if you think about it, just think about the people you interact with, and go back and recall specifically, for example, a conversation you had this morning, and try and recall all the details of the conversation, and you can't. And that's because you have a memory issue. It's because you aren't really fixated on the person or what they said. It's what was the nature of the interaction and how did it make you feel? If I'm a jerk to you this morning, or if I'm a wonderful person, you can't articulate what the conversation was or what necessarily I did that made me come off as a jerk versus making me come off as wonderful. Um, but but you can feel the experience from our interaction. So take that chance, reach out to people who are outside the circle. And I do think that's where the magic happens. So that was maybe well, it was the deeper question, because the funny college story. Oh my gosh, it's sort of a raunchy college story.
We can go
Um,
there.
but I'm thankful because and I will tie it into this whole mindfulness concept. So I try to keep my cool at all times now. And I think I'm doing a better job of it because now when I misplace my wallet, which is fairly regularly, I don't have elevated anxiety and I don't get mad at everyone and turn into a beast. I'm logically go back and I eventually I find I haven't lost a wallet in years and years. But my funniest college story does deal with a lost wallet and maybe being a little too relaxed. So I I remember I had a fun Saturday night in the dorms, and I don't clearly remember everything that happened. Go figure the odds of that. And the next morning, I woke up to someone knocking on my door, and they had my wallet, and they said, "Rod, we found your wallet in the washing machine in another dorm that I had never been to on another floor that I had never been to. But the wallet was perfectly intact. All of my money was in it. All of my, my social security card, everything was there. And it didn't go through the wash. It was dry, Lauren. So I have no clue. My wallet had a more interesting night than I did and got out more than and experienced more of the campus than I had experienced at that point. So
That's so funny. Do you have any idea how it got in another dorm? Like, did someone steal your pants or you don't know? Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
yep.
That's a good one. That's not too raunchy.
No, no. And they did, and again, all the money was in it too. So no clue. No clue.
Wow. That's so fun. It's almost like Flat Stanley, like going around the world. Like, Rod's wallet, where has it been?
Yeah.
That's so good. Well, thank you so much. This was so rich. Thank you just for, yeah, sharing your wisdom. I feel like such good takeaways of, I'm like asking myself, like, who are my five? And then I'm going to create that Rolodex. I love that idea. I know a Carthage graduate named Tim Rux, who we both know, he used to write cards to someone every day. So he'd start his day writing a card to someone from his past or currently, and people at his funeral talked about like receiving his cards. And then his big like mantra was ace, be an ace, like attitude, character, and enthusiasm. And so yeah, those things are like what people remember. And you never know who you can, yeah, you can reach out to someone on a day where they really need it, and you're right, like those connections are
And
such a
Rux,
gift.
to his credit, that took a lot of effort, the writing.
Yes, yes,
But to do the Rolodex and just do a text,
yes.
very little. So it's baby steps. And you might
Yep.
graduate to be as great as Tim Rux and do the note. I one of my mentors, who's now retired, sends birthday cards. And she taught me to keep a list of people who are close to me and send cards for their birthdays. And you have no idea, Lauren, how much that makes people happy. And I I'll throw like a $20 gift card to Total Wine in there, or sometimes I'll throw a lottery ticket in there and say, I hope I was sure lucky to meet you. Hope you get as much luck out of this. And the
Oh,
lottery, though, they got to share it with
yeah, right. Share the winnings. Oh, I love that. Oh, Rod, you're such a winner. Thank you so much. This has been such a gift. Thank you for who you are.
you too. Thanks, Lauren.